Okay, so looking here again at Wizard of Oz stuff, let's start with Grady. Grady, overall, I think this is looking pretty good. I think you need a couple things. I feel like it doesn't really feel like a finished illustration, it just feels like a sketch, and I think it's just kind of a floating head. And so it's a neat interpretation of the lion. I think what you do to sort of finish it off, make it feel like a final illustration. His eyes feel a little like they need a little something. And I get a little confused in here. It's not really confused, it's just like this, like, it feels like WWW, like these like little double dip shapes here. Like they just, loop down and down and down. And I think even just breaking this in a few spots may help, like putting a little bit of a, I don't know, like that. There's something in there that just feels like that's a little too repeating. And it's like this line goes all the way through. So maybe even just starting this line here and kind of fading out to transparent here and then fading back in up here may help. I also feel like it would be neat to see a little bit of shading in here. So I don't know if it would just be like some very small lines to get some of your shading. I don't know. You're going a slightly different style, but it's feeling a little flat and like a floating head. So that would be the biggest thing I would say to work on. Jean-Luc, a second to pop up here. Um, I like that it's called Flying Monkey Greg. So is that me? Okay, let's see. Flying Monkey Greg. Um, so yeah. Anyway, no. So something I noticed when we zoom in here, a lot of the lines are just kind of truncated. They just kind of end. And so when we get these like little overlaps in there, it just feels a little like computer generated. The same here. Like that just kind of it feels disconnected, and so it feels a little unfinished in that way. Like, or it feels, I guess, simple in that way. I like that's what you would get with a computer generated line, like out of like Word or something, not a Word, Paintbrush or something. So like, if we can add some profileness to that, I think we get some really neat alternatives. And I notice when we do that this line has a little bit more thickness. It's like 2, and so I recognize that you could play with that. So you could give like a little bit thicker lines to some of these. Let's see, take some areas that are kind of shadowed areas a little bit, right? Maybe like that, uh, there, there. So just kind of playing around with it a little bit, getting some of these lines that maybe would have more shadow, right? Um, and maybe even like that, that. And so start cranking those numbers up a little bit, and you start getting a little bit more volume in there. So you see how that's kind of, you're kind of adding a little bit more depth to some of these shapes. And so I think that's something you could play around with, definitely, as a way of like, showing the areas. And I mean, you could get kind of crazy with it if you wanted to, getting in here and going really, pretty big on some of these, just to see what that does to the darkness of it, right? And so I think that playing with that would be really a really neat way of getting sort of some shadow effect without having to actually draw them in, right? So uh, that would probably be the one of the easier methods of doing that. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, but I do feel like he needs a little bit of shadowing or detail. He felt a little too like thin pencil sketch, and so I think adding a little bit of that might be a neat way of sort of playing with that. So maybe play around with that and see what you come up with. But overall, it's a really neat form. I like the idea of it. Where are we at? Jonah. Ooh. I love all the different takes on the flying monkeys. Um, so Sorry, that shaking is me shaking a drink. So, so that's kind of a neat way of looking at the flying monkey. And this one, you carry it all the way out to the edge. So it's kind of, I guess it kind of depends on which framing you're wanting, because without the wings, it's still pretty descriptive. And you're splitting right down the middle of the face, so that's an interesting make you uncomfortable feel to it. But I think it was neat to play with that idea of like how little of the monkey can you show and still communicate it. Right now, I feel like it's an interesting style um, that I think it's still kind of lacking in some form. Um, so this is maybe another one that would just simply help by having a background. Let me move this down here and see what would happen if we just put a colored background behind it. Like, that's a neat idea of what we get there. And it starts to feel a little bit more filled in, maybe. So it doesn't mean it's absolutely necessary, but like it just feels a little like a sketch, like it still needs some detail. And then your arms feel like kind of like they're just kind of barrel arms, right? They don't have a lot of form going on. The head is kind of a simple shape, and then you kind of break that style of these sharp jagged lines with these. Oh, that's neat. That's how you did that. You kind of break that idea with this. That's interesting. That's the way you went about making that. I like it. Um, and so playing around with that is, um, maybe you could play with a different way of getting um, some of these areas that are defined as very dark, like maybe getting a little bit of texture around them too to sort of pull this shagginess to the inside. So right now it's like you just define the outlining areas with the shagginess, and so I wonder if you could get a little bit more texture in here um, just by kind of layering in some additional strokes. Hold on one second. Let me pause this for a second. Oh, yeah, let me record this video and then. But I appreciate it. Thank you. Maybe she'll swing by later on. So. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so this is so hopefully that makes sense. Sorry about that. I got some people kind of coming in and checking in on stuff. So, so Mary, I think you got some pretty neat stuff going on with this guy. I think everybody kind of chose similar things. I guess it's a very iconic. Okay, it's a very iconic story. So my only real note on this is that everything, like, I actually really kind of like this one. It's that I think that there's a little bit missing in. No, I don't want to say that. I actually really like what you got going on with the style of the line. I feel like there's a little bit missing in the form. Like his body is kind of a box. His arms are kind of boxy. His legs are kind of boxy, and his feet are both kind of pointing forward. In fact, I think they may be the same foot. And then but you kind of got this interesting line style you're using, and I like that. But then you got this patch on the knee that just feels like a solid filled in color. And so I think that's where like the style sort of like that kind of changes the style a little bit. So this implies to me that when we have these dark areas that we would fill those in with a solid color, but instead you've been using kind of this outlined shape. And so I think that you could play with that a little bit to, how else could you define this knee patch without having to make it a full outlined dark spot. I think playing a little bit around with the form to get this a little bit more dynamic would help too. And then the last thing is like his hands feel a little uh, like overly simple, and like they need just a little bit more cleaning up. You know, like this finger feels really thick, and like that's not meeting all the way, and that gets kind of thick, and you got kind of these sharp or these dark changes here. So I mean, just very small little things like that. Again, this one feels like an icon, or like an icon or a sketch, and so it feels like it needs a little bit of something else to sort of finish it off into a final illustration. But that's not a huge element of this exercise. But it'd be nice if that kind of I'm sorry, that was Mars, not Mary. My bad. Um, and I may have actually said that. So let's see. Ooh, creepy monkey. I think we can look at him like that. No, that gets pixelated. Uh, okay, hold on one second while I cough. Sorry about that. I had to. Okay, so this is actually a really neat style to me. I like that you're using the underdrawing, the sketch, to kind of shade the overdrawing. So this is a different feel than this. And so I think that's actually working pretty neat. It's creepy that there's no eyes. The only thing I'd say is like, particularly in the underdrawing, like, these lines just feel very computer generated to me. So I'm gonna freeze it all so we can select them. Right, and it's because they get that perfect rounded edge and they're the same like width all the way through. So again, I know it's a different feel if we do something like this and change everything. It was probably about more like 4, was it about where it was? And then setting that to like this. That's a different feel, but it's kind of, actually I kind of like that. I just kind of have a preference for that line, but we didn't even have to use that line. Even if we use something like this, you know, we get like some really interesting elements to that. Or even if we don't use that at all, what if we just use that? And so just playing around with that a little bit, I think you're going to get some really interesting results. And like this area is looking really good, but this isn't looking as good. So I mean, just playing around with the different width profiles, I think would really just add a huge amount of interestingness to this piece. So again, I know you're using the round, like people have tried stuff like that, and that's going to give you a different. So I feel like there's a lot you could play with in the type of line to get a different result. And I think it'd be a good idea to just kind of play around with that. And again, this is one that kind of feels like it's a sketch, and you know, it needs a little bit of something else to sort of tie it together as a final piece. But I mean, again, that's all right. Like, there's nothing wrong with the sketch. I think that you have the opportunity to do that. You probably could sort of, you know, round that off and finish it up. Who is this again? I forgot to click Patrick. Okay. I like it. This is neat. So I think it's interesting. You get a lot of very straight lines in this. I get this line and it's just a perfectly straight line. And so I get the impression that probably how you did this was just with the line tool. Just did a whole lot of lines over and over again. And so there's nothing wrong with that. These areas here, I think, are interesting because it looks like you did them maybe with the blob brush. I can't completely tell, but it looks like the blob brush or some other type of shape that you're getting there, but it's weird that they're not sort of merged together. So some of this may be you're coming from a different version of Illustrator to this one, so that might be what I'm seeing. But just because of how they were made, I'm kind of seeing some of the messiness around here, like this little jaggedness through here, and this one too, like even at the corners of these lines here, we can see the truncated sections there. So just stretching those on off, or off to the edge of the page. Um, you're playing with, I would say you're playing with your composition a little bit here. How do I get into? I'm trying to grab just the legs. Anyway, I would consider grabbing. There they are. Grabbing just the legs without this thing. Oh, and so I don't know. Maybe not. I was gonna say we could try rotating them that way, so it feels like they're. I guess it's really just this line here that's throwing me off. Like it just really needs to extend off the page, and then it won't feel as weird that I'm worried that the top of her body is going to come out the edge of the house here, because that indicates sort of the edge of the house to me. And so I think that that's kind of what I'm seeing, and saying that you should, extend these lines on off the edge of the page, so so we don't get that feeling to it. Does that make sense? But overall, this one's looking pretty good. And again, kind of solid white background. I think we could play around with it a little bit to, try some other things that are kind of neat. I like this. I'll say this is Ryan. Okay, so I just really like this. I don't know if this is your own idea or if you've kind of basing this off of another illustration, but this is just awesome. The few things that I would say is I think some of these lines down here, I think they just feel a little even, and so figuring out even just sort of a variable line width to sort of break that up a little bit. Probably even want something way more complex than that. Like what you have going on down here feels really neat, and I don't feel it so much in this piece here. That's kind of flowing through there. I really like it, and I think I would maybe tone down the cloud darkness just to like maybe make that like what's if that's 0.75 instead of 0.5. Grab all those, try all of them like 0.75, and just to kind of pull back on them just a little bit. Maybe 0.5. What's that do? Yeah, just so we get a little bit more of this standing out. But I love it. Like I want you to print it out. Like it looks really good. So Teresa. Okay. Sorry. So this is looking good. I like a lot of what you got going on in here. I like the only thing I would say is like this has a very computer gradient feel to it. And so even though this feels less finished, like I like it a little bit better without the gradient. So I wonder if like the answer is really just like maybe instead of a gradient on this layer, maybe we have a the bottom here. Maybe this is actually just gray. And like, what does that kind of do to it? What I think would actually be neat is if just his background were gray and then he were like a slightly different color. Um, but the gradient just feels a little, so that may be doable. So just put that. Apparently not. I don't know how we. Uh, Using some clipping masks. So yeah, we're getting closer, but you get the idea. Like just something like that even would look pretty neat to have him sort of on a solid background with him in a slightly different color. Overall, though, I really like this one. I think he gets a little too shadowed right around here in the face, and it'd be nice to see a little bit more of the areas in there kind of peeking through. And I think you get much more of that effect of what you're getting down here in the rest of the body. His face just gets a little dark in this area and right down in here. And so just some extra highlights would help that. But overall, this is a really interesting piece, and I like what you're getting out of it. The vortex of gradient behind him just gets a little detracting from it. Try this. Yeah, interesting. So I think this is another one where you're like you have some lines where you're really doing some neat stuff on them, and then others that are just kind of like they get this very boxy like truncated shape. There's nothing that says that that's really bad um, to have that. But I mean, even if it's just going in here to these lines onto the stroke option and just putting some caps on them, just like not letting them be perfectly flat on the end. Even just doing that helps a little. But if you want to play around with the profile, I think you just get a little bit of a better result from it. I think it just reads better to me. Um, Again, I automatically just put that one on there because it's the easiest, but play around with that and see what you get. And I think that this is working, uh, but I think we could even tighten it up a little bit more compositionally. Like we got a lot of this empty stuff going on down here and a little bit of empty stuff going on here. And so even if we just had a little bit more going on there or just scaled it in a way to where it was focusing in on a different area a little bit, I think that would just really help to kind of pull it all together. So, okay, hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to y'all soon. I'll have the stuff for the two projects up next. So, talk to you soon. Bye.